Hi, it's Stuart Sutton. I hope your day and your real estate is going great. When I was a junior in high school, I joined the swim team. I'd never swam competitively before and was told this was really a very unusual situation. I didn't really realize why, but soon came to realize that virtually everybody in the swim team had been swimming competitively most of their lives. Very rarely did someone join the team at such a late age. But I had a great friend who had invited me, and the coach was kind enough to agree. My first practice, the coach came out, all the swimmers were on one end of the pool, and he laid out the workout. There were some sprints, there was some endurance, all combined for what I thought was going to be a pretty arduous workout. I'd never had a swimming workout before. So anyway, we started and finished, and it was arduous. Took quite a while. I was absolutely exhausted. My limbs felt rubbery, and I was relieved at the same time, emotionally relieved. That was my first practice. I was done. I took a deep breath, and I was really glad. Well, the coach walked out of his office, which was alongside of the indoor pool over on the side where the offices and locker rooms were, and he came down to the end of the pool and proceeded to lay out the real workout, because what I just finished was the warm-up. I could not believe it. Anyway, I made it through that somehow. I still don't know how, but that sense of relief was taken away very quickly. And this applies to real estate transactions. I'm going to show you how in just a second, so stay tuned. If you've watched any of my other videos, you probably know that when a seller receives an offer from a buyer, there are three options. Accept if the terms are just like you'd like, accept the offer, reject the offer if it's abysmally poor, or number three, counter the offer and provide terms that you would accept to the buyer. The buyer then has a choice of accept, reject, or counter. So once that has transpired, maybe go back and forth once, twice, three times, you've reached an agreement and you have kind of a sense of relief. We're under contract. This is great. Well, I'm going to liken that to my warm-up. You are not quite through negotiating. Negotiating can be kind of arduous, kind of demanding. Some buyers make it easier than others. Some sellers make it easier than others. I find in today's environment, it can be a little bit more demanding sometimes. But you're in for a second negotiation. When the buyer has their inspection, the inspector will flag some things. If you're prepared and have done some of the things we recommend and that we do for you, it'll be less stressful. But the buyer will come up with some repairs typically, and they'll either want funds for those repairs to be paid in closing costs, or they'll want the repairs done. So when they come up with that, you have some things to keep in mind. Always get that in writing. Yes, you'd be surprised. Sometimes you don't get it in writing. You get sort of a request, maybe an email from the agent. Always see proof. The reason for that is I have had situations many times over the years where we were sent a request, if I represented the seller, to do these certain things, even in writing, but we didn't have proof. So when we asked for proof, we got the pages of the inspection report. Side note, some agents don't like to get the whole inspection report for their seller because you have to disclose that if this buyer doesn't close. You've got to disclose it to the next buyer. So we just asked for the pages that are related to the requests that are made for repairs. Hope that makes sense. So once the proof comes, we found many times over the years that it didn't match up to the requests. So we address that and move forward. Next, always get your own bids. Always, always. If you don't have trusted, experienced people that you have a history with, your agent should. And unfortunately, some agents don't. I've seen this many times where the agent literally goes to somebody they've never had dealings with before. And bids can be wildly different. National companies, I'm not picking on national companies at all, but big companies tend to have higher prices than local vendors. So HVAC, electrician, plumber, roofer, septic, foundation engineer, all of that. If you don't have someone with a history of trust and service, then you need to make sure your agent does. Okay? So make sure that you get your own bids. I've seen bids, I'll give you an example of a recent one. $30,000 request from the buyer for septic, ended up only being about $1,200 worth of repairs. HVAC, $14,000 to replace systems, ended up being about $800 worth of repairs. So bottom line is that you need to be ready for whatever the buyer, you can't just take for granted what the requests are or what their experts bid for you. You have to validate that and make sure. Now, if those repairs are needed, great, you just got to deal with it. But if you've prepared in advance, you know if repairs like that are needed or not. So always, these are some more important rules. Always include a roofer, always include an engineer. What does that mean? Well, if the inspector says, for example, that you've got some hail damage, and you call your insurance company and get them out there, never, ever let an insurance adjuster look at your roof unless your roofer is there. Now, that's, again, if you have a trusted roofer with whom you have experience. I don't know that I would really care if it were a new roofer I've never met before. I'd still want a roofer on the roof with that insurance adjuster. I've had many situations as recently as last month where the insurance company was not going to allow the claim, and the roofer showed them why and made sure that they honored that claim. Had one, this is kind of an interesting example, well, at least it is to me, hope it is to you. The insurance company said, that's not hail damage, that's what we call blistering. Well, my roofer knew the style and the make of the shingle did not blister. So he said, this shingle doesn't blister. That's hail damage. Insurance company honored the claim. They wouldn't have if my roofer hadn't been there. So make sure your roofer's always there if you have an insurance adjuster come look at your roof. Next, always make sure you follow up with an engineer. This happened literally this week while I'm recording this. Buyer had the inspector say, you need to have the foundation checked. It seems to be moving a little. They said, okay. They brought out a foundation company who came out and said, yes, you need work, and gave us a bid, nearly $7,000. My seller, as I guided them, had an engineer, a professional engineer, come out, look at the foundation, do their measurements, do their calculations, and they said, this foundation's fine. You need no work at all. That's a pretty big difference between you need $7,000 of work to you need no work at all. That's a big, big difference. So always follow up with an engineer. Now, if the foundation company had come out and said, hey, you don't need any work, then great, you stop there. But don't just take for granted. Don't just spend that $7,000. Or I've had bids of $12,000 and an engineer said no work needed. The engineer is the expert. Foundation companies do the inspections as a service and to get business. I'm not questioning the integrity of foundation companies at all. I've had great luck over the years with foundation companies. But if they recommend work, follow up and make sure that an engineer validates that, because a $750 bill to an engineer is a whole lot less expensive than a $7,000 bill to a foundation company. I hope this makes sense. I sincerely hope you found this helpful. I always try to point out things you may not have been aware of, and these were some very important ones. Remember, it's your choice. Make it a powerful day. Bye-bye.